Let's make a gouache palette. Hi, Shanna Rowe Jackson here from Caution Artist at Play. Welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be having some fun with gouache. I am going to be putting together my own travel palette with gouache. This is the Artist Mart paint palette and brush basin. I first heard about this from Sketches and Scrubs. She has a fantastic channel, great personality. She works a lot with gouache and watercolor, and I first saw this mentioned on her channel, and as soon as I saw it, of course, I'm like, I have to get it. I will link her in the description below, by the way. But I'm like, yeah, I gotta get that because I've been working with gouache more and more lately in my sketchbook, and so I thought this would be perfect for when I go on day trips with my husband in the summer, and I, of course, had it on my wish list and then ended up getting it around Christmas time. So you probably saw this in my art haul for Christmas. So let's take a look at it. It's a fun little travel palette. It clips together. You can pop this up and then pop it out. And then this is a water basin. It's collapsible, so you could fit quite a bit of water in it, but you know, it's more compact for when you're traveling. I got the blue one. There's different colors. I just thought this one was the funnest and I liked the strap the most. I'm not sure how often I'll use the strap, but anyway. And then the palette itself pops open like this, and it has a nice rubber seal so that it will stay wet. Now, I have to be honest, I'm not concerned about if the gouache dries out or not, because you can still use gouache if it dries out. In fact, they used to sell gouache pans a lot more often than they do now. Some companies still sell gouache pans. One of my favorite palettes is the Caran d'Ache Studio Gouache Pan Set, and that is dried up gouache, and it works perfectly fine. And so if mine dries out, I'm not going to be that concerned. In fact, if it dries out, I'll have less of a chance of it molding, and so I'm not sure if I'm going to be too concerned about it. So one of the issues that I've heard others talk about online about this palette is that because it traps moisture in so well, it can cause molding on the paints. However, from what I have seen, people who have used them, they put clove oil in it, and that kind of helps. I don't want to mess around with all that. I will if I have to, but I really don't want to. As I said, I'd probably just let them dry out before I end up having to get too finicky about it. But they do say that if you leave it just ajar a little bit after working, you know, after you've spritzed it with water, that it won't mold as easily. And also only spritz it with water, like the amount that you actually need to get the consistency you want. Don't overspray your paints with water, and that helps prevent mold as well. But I will also probably use some rubbing alcohol as well to clean them up. So that's how I plan to prevent molding is, you know, I'll just keep an eye on it regularly and check up on it and keep them clean and things like that. So let's talk about the paint that we're going to use. Oh, there's 16 wells here, by the way. So I'm going to be using 16 different paints. And the brand that I am using is going to be Holbein. These are fantastic. I love the Holbein gouache. In fact, one of my first experiences with the Holbein brand was when I was in college, and my painting professor had us use the gouache, which is, I still have that set. This is the set that I had in college. And they're just vibrant and beautiful and pigmented. So that's the brand that I'm going to be using. I will say that my friends at Holbein were generous enough to send me these other colors upon request when I decided I wanted to create this palette. So thank you to Holbein for sending these to me. They are not sponsoring this video. I'm not getting paid for this. I just wanted to have some more of their gouache, and they were fantastic and sent me some. So, something else that is really great, after I had already gotten these colors in, I watched more videos about this palette, and people who had experienced issues with mold tended to experience it with certain brands. And one of the things that I've seen in numerous videos is that people who have the Holbein gouache haven't had to worry about mold. Now, obviously, I can't speak 100% for everybody else, but I did find that interesting that in the videos that I watched, there was one video where somebody had some M. Graham and Holbein, and I think maybe some Winsor Newton in their palette, and there was mold on the M. Graham. but not on their Holbein. And I was like, oh, well, that's great because that's the brand that I'm using. But I just love their gouache anyway. And so I'm very, very excited about this palette. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to squirt some out in each of the pans. I'm probably going to do a time lapse for that. And then I'd like to do a piece in my sketchbook after with this palette. I thought that this would be a fun color scheme. I also have a few other fun colors that I'm going to keep beside this. I have some silver and I have some gold and I have some of the opera pink, and that's just going to be to add pop to artwork. But I thought that this color scheme would be great for a travel palette. I like to go out in nature and things like that, especially here in Maine. And so this is going to be my main palette, but I do have some other fun colors and I might incorporate those in my artwork as well. All right, so let's get started. Okay, starting to put my color in. You're going to see a little red paper clip. I'm just using that to get into the crevices. I started with my primary white. Then I moved on to my gray number 1, cobalt violet, primary cyan, and you're going to see me mix up some of the colors that are a little bit older because I needed to add some water to them. So that's why that took a little longer. And then I moved on to my phthalo green, cobalt green pale, moss green. And I put this in the lower part of the palette because I anticipate my extras being on top. Cad green pale. And the reason for putting the extras on top is because I think the hinge might get in the way while I'm working. And so I wanted my primary colors to be down on the bottom. And then I put in my primary yellow. I should have probably put that in a different spot. Added yellow to that because, again, I've had that one since college. And then Cad yellow lemon, which should have been reversed with the primary yellow. John Brilliant number 2, and primary magenta. So that's my main part of the palette. Now for the fun extras. Let's see the other colors that I have as options. I have iris, I have permanent green deep, though I already have quite a few greens here. I don't know that I actually need that one. I already have a purple, and I don't use purple a lot, and this one is only 1 star as far as light fastness goes. I have the opera pink, which is a lot of fun, but I don't know that I'm going to add it because I don't work with neons all that often. So, I kind of want to keep that as a fun way to add color, but I don't know that I want it to be part of my main palette. And then I also have 2 different kinds of silver. I have brilliant silver and just silver. So I think I'd like to add one of those. And then I also have this fun brilliant pink, so I think I am going to put this one here. And then I have 2 different kinds of gold. I have pearl gold and rich gold, and I almost want to add both of these because I just think this one's like a lighter gold. And this one is like a darker, more like bronzy color. I don't know if you can see these. So there's quite a difference between the 2 of them, so I think I might add both of these, and then one of the silvers, and then the pink. I think that's what I'm going to do. Also, let's talk a little bit about the fact that I inverted my yellows. I wanted that yellow there and that yellow there, and then this probably should have been moved over closer to the blue. But I'm not going to waste the paint. I'm not going to dig it out now. Here it is. This is going to be my palette. It's not going to be perfect, but I'm the only one working from it, so screw it. It doesn't matter. I'll deal. I'll live. All right, so I'm going to add the other colors. Okay, so this is my palette. She's a little bit janky, baby, but that's all right because it's mine. The only thing I'm kind of worried about is that there not being a lot of mixing space. So we'll see about that. But the thing that I liked is I still have a ton of paint left in these. So if I want to use them or if I need to refill, this is one reason why I like filling my own palette is because, you know, it gives me more options. And I should mention, these are still going to get used, even though I didn't put them in the palette. It's just that this is going to be the colors I probably use the most. But I will definitely use these in my sketchbook and things like that. They're not going to go to waste. I'm not about the wasting art supplies thing. But yeah, I'm very excited about this. So I want to do a piece. How did I get a hair? Having animals is fantastic, except for when you're trying to deal with paint. Anyway, so this is my janky, out of order, custom palette. I mean, she's custom all right. She's custom because there's not another palette out there like this, especially the color order. I'm not gonna lie, the perfectionist in me is twitching. But hey, I'm gonna make it work. So I am going to pull out my Jane Davenport watercolor art journal, and I am going to paint something fun with these. So stay tuned for that. Okay, so the first thing I decided to do was to do a little swatch card with these. And the main reason for this is because the palette that I have didn't allow for me to really write on it to show what's in there. And so this is going to be my reference as to what colors I have in this palette. As far as swatching goes, though, it's not really necessary with these paints because what you see is what you get. With Holbein, they don't add a bunch of fillers like other supply companies out there do. They don't add any whitening agents to their gouache, which I think is fantastic. So there's very little color shift or anything like that. You're not going to have the chalky look like you get with cheaper brands. And so I didn't really need to swatch to see what my colors are. I just really wanted to have a record of what I had in my palette for future reference. So that way there, when I go to refill a color, I'll know exactly what color to refill it with. Okay, so now I'm going to move on to the project. And this is a fun little sunflower from a reference photo that I took this past summer. My husband did a sunflower garden with a variety of sunflowers. I think that this sunflower is called, I think it's like a chocolate sunflower or something like that. It's not your basic sunflower. It's going to have more color to it than just the regular yellow petals. And I started off with a fun little bokeh background. And I just had so much fun with this. And I'm going to use varying amounts of water depending on what effect I'm going for. And some of the paints that I had, like I said, I've had since college. So my white one, that one I am going to need another one of, I discovered throughout doing this, because I had already used so much of it when I was in college. And so I put out as much as I could in the palette, but I don't have a lot left over. And obviously I had to use some in this. And then it turned out that in the palette, even though I used my little paper clip to get into the crevices and stuff, I still ended up with some air pockets. And I ended up with less paint in the pans than I thought I had, because some would have an air pocket underneath. And then once it settled while I was painting, I ended up with less in there. However, with these paints, a little goes a long way. They're very pigmented, and as I mentioned, they don't use whiteners. They rely more on the matte properties of the pigments that they use, so they're vibrant very quickly right out of the gate, so I didn't need as much. And even with adding water, I didn't need as much. And I like to go in thin and then work thick after, so I kind of go in with my thinner layers and thicken things up as I go and add less water as I go. That way there, my layers below aren't lifting as easily. So I kind of think of fat over lean in oil painting, but instead it's actually a little bit different here, because really I'm just using watered down layers below and then using less water in the layers above, so I'm not lifting the layers below, because obviously gouache is like watercolor and you can disrupt the layers below if you use a lot of water. So I think of it that way. I go in watery first, and then I come in with my more painty layers after. And this sunflower was so much fun to do because I could use my brush strokes to create the detail. It didn't take much to get the detail in the petals because my brush pretty much did all the texture for me. And I'm just using cheap brushes here. I think the one that I have in my hand right now is an Artify brush. And then I have some Royal Langnickel and a few other just cheapies that I bought from Amazon. I'm just having fun because I really miss summer. It's been super snowy and I miss my sunflowers. I have to say, I really enjoy working with these paints, and part of that could be a nostalgia thing because I worked with them in college and things like that, but I just love the vibrancy and I love the consistency. And even though I had some that were older, because like I said, they were from college, like you can tell my white and then the primary colors, you can tell they have different packaging. So they've like rebranded their package since I got those ones in college. But anyway, even those ones worked really, really well. Even though I added a little bit of water to bring them back to consistency, they worked perfectly. And so I just really enjoyed the flow. I enjoyed the vibrancy and the texture. Now let's talk about this palette a little bit. So one thing to keep in mind is that you don't want to overflow the pans in this palette because it has that little rubber thing which pushes into it. And so sometimes it may not even seem like the pans are very full, but then once you close it and that rubber thing squishes into the pans, then it forces the paint out around the edges. I found that out the hard way. My silver got all over my hand after I first filled the palette and closed it for the first time. Yeah, that was interesting. And then there was a few other colors that kind of squished as well. And so that's something to keep in mind if you decide to get this palette. Try not to fill the pans too much. That being said, I had the amount I needed. The pans aren't very large. They're probably maybe even a little bit smaller than a regular half pan if you consider the fact that you can't fill them all the way. But gouache, a little goes a long way. As I said, the only color that I'm going to need to refill is my white, and that's just because I didn't have a lot left to begin with. The rest of it all was really good. And then I think there's like a couple colors that I had that had air pockets that I'll need to refill, but that was just because the pan wasn't really full to begin with. Now, as you can see, I'm pulling my tape, which had a fun edge because I tore the tape before I laid it on my paper because I wanted to play around and have a nice natural rough edge, which I really like the effect of, and I think I'll do in the future in other pieces in my sketchbook. Okay, here is my final piece. I had so much fun. It was a perfect project for a cold winter rainy day. There are my swatches. I'm very, very happy with how it came out. It was so much fun. I did put a little bit of gold in the middle. Actually, I put some silver right smack in the middle and then some. Look how pretty that is. I'm loving it. Now let's look at the palette. This worked out actually really well. One thing that I noticed is I had some air pockets that I didn't realize. So like, especially under the yellow, I didn't realize there was an air pocket in there. And so it has a lot less in it than I thought it did. But other than that, it wasn't too bad. So I didn't end up using a lot of paint. It looks like I used more paint than I actually did. I'll have to add some more of my primary yellow to that. But other than that, it was great. I got a little messy, so I have a little bit of color that I'm going to need to clean out of each of the pans, but I really, really like it. This is going to be perfect for on the go. I'm going to seal this up now, though. They're getting a little crunchy around the edges. This part of it worked really well as well, though I'm somebody who, when I work on a piece this size, I like to have more than one water well. So I can have clean water and dirty water. Otherwise, the water gets really dirty really easily. I don't think that's going to be an issue when I'm traveling, though, because I do plan on working in a much smaller sketchbook. I have a small hand and mule sketchbook that's like a 3x5 or something like that. It's really tiny that I will most likely use with this palette. But I was at home, so I wanted to work in my big sketchbook, and it got the job done. I had a great time. I hope you enjoyed watching this. I will probably be showing this in future videos, and if I have any issues in the future with it, I'll bring it back and I'll keep you updated on it, just so you all can know how it goes. But I think it's going to be okay. All right, thank you so much for watching. I will see you next week. If you liked this video, please hit that like button. Hit subscribe if you'd like to see more content like this. Thank you so much. You have a fantastic day. Bye.